Hi, I'm Rob, an indie rock and pop mixing engineer from just outside London. Welcome to my studio. If you've got a project that needs a professional set of ears, I'd love to help you bring it to life. Head over to rjcmusicproduction.co.uk to check out my portfolio and book me to mix your songs. Hello, welcome to part 2 of my mix through of High Tables by Winona. Hope you enjoy this look at mix bus processing and busing. So I'm going to go through those elements in the track. Feel free to check out part 1 if you've just clicked on this video. And part 1 goes through how my mix bus or my mixing process and thoughts on individual tracks. So let's dive into it. Okay, so talking the mix bus, and this is kind of quite common for my processes. Number 1 in the chain is always mix bus, and I'll add this once I've done a balance and fixing issues. Once I've loaded the tracks into my template and I've got the levels and the gain structure looking and sounding right. Then I'll apply Mixboss onto the mix. The control I find gives me some multi-band kind of compressor. That does pretty much exactly what it says, controls. And I had a problem with not a problem, but the low end was an issue. If I play without this is how it's kind of a bit of a fake situation, because most of the bus processing I add on after this, so it's not a true representation of how I set this up. And I tend to kind of tweak this afterwards as well. So this would be somewhere around the starting point where I'd have my settings. But let's have a listen without. So this is adding, there's an issue you can probably hear with the low end, which I fix with Masterplan a little bit later, and a bit of this Air EQ. But really great plugin, especially this enhanced star, if I just tweak that in and out. So really nice control, I love that. This is pretty much where I had it for the mix. So a little bit of the limiter, which I like. The mix EQ works. So all round great. That's what I'll have on my mix bus. And then I'd go back and do some more mixing, automation, whatever I needed to do on the individual tracks. Then I can have a look at the kind of frequency balance with tonal balance, and I use in combination with the Air EQ. I find this is a little bit goes a long way, and this is really lifting out the mid-range, which I felt was a little problematic. So if I just bypass this in and out. Sure, I've got the keys in. So that's kind of that mid-range push, the vocals and the snare, kind of making it sound more exciting and brighter. And then I'd use tonal balance control just to give me some hints about other areas that I might want to have a look at. And there's this problem with the low end, which I ended up not using too much of this EQ to fix low end. I preferred Masterplan, low end EQ, and tweaking for that, which I'll show you in a minute. So usually next to my chain, it would be a kind of compressor if I needed it. I didn't feel that this track needed a bus compressor as such, just more kind of frequency tweaking. Crafter being a limiter, but I find this gives me a great sense of energy. So if I bring this in and out, you'll hear. Make sure I bring the keys in again. Let's try that with the keys. So hopefully you could hear some of what that was doing. It just kind of gives a whole lift to the mix that I like. And then this Hi-Fall plugin, Hi-Fall, giving me a lot more top end or high mids from 4K and above, and just doing its thing. So you can definitely hear that the cymbals, high end of the cymbals, and the snare drum, the brightness of the snare. I love that kind of high end boost from that plugin. Then Masterplan, which is on most of my mix bus. I tend to switch between Masterplan or Ozone. And if needed, Limitless I will use, but for this track I found that Masterplan gave me most of what I needed to kind of tweak, and really the loudness is something which I would add to the client mix so they can do revisions and get back to me with any revisions. But realistically, I would send the track off to my mastering engineer Lewis Chapman, so check him out on my website and add his services to your order when you book me for mixes, and he will do an incredible professional job at mastering your track. This is more just a sort of, I would keep the EQ and probably widening and these things on the track that I'd send him, but I'd probably remove the kind of clipper limiter so he can get the loudness right. I've set it into Unity mode so you don't hear the difference, the loudness difference of this, so you can hear what this plugin's now going to be doing. I'll have it in bypass first and then bring it in. And you can hear that doing quite a bit of heavy lifting, particularly in the high end and the mid range. This is kind of a broad boost. So I was just feeling overall that without it, the mix just sounded, very sort of low in terms of pitch. I tend to think of high frequencies being higher up in terms of height. So I wanted that height and that sheen and that presence even more than what I did with the Hi-Fall. But this is giving me a lot more of that with the width and this mid-range push for the voices mainly and keys, and taming some of the lows. So just checking with that. So you can see there, I guess, if you can't hear the difference, that's what I'm changing. So I felt that the low end balance was a little out. So there's a little cut in the low end and a little boost in the high mids and highs. And Masterplan did that for me. I quite like the tape mode. So this is doing quite a bit of good things to the bass. If you listen to that synth bass. So for me, that's kind of reining in that synth. It's quite a heavy synth bass sound, so it's kind of evening out those that real kind of low end there, tightening it up as it says, and then a bit of thickness on the low end to compensate for the drop that I'm giving in the whole mix. Overall, great plugin. Now just here with the extra level that it gives you, just give you a kind of biased bypass. Yeah, and you get the idea. So that's the kind of thinking behind using that. Now we come on to some more bus processing. So if you remember back in part 1, we had these two drum versions. In this section, we've got this program beat and real drums. So with the real drums, it's kind of options that I have for my drum bus. And then this is the overall drum bus. So a bit of shadow hills, just taming some of that kick drum. Reacting to that, and then I added in the bridge, there's this section where the drums drop in terms of frequency. So a bit of Pro Q for doing that, and then this adding some kind of real room depth, if you like, or room sound to the drums. So if I just crank this up to 100% wet, giving you an idea of what it's doing. Yeah, it gives a real nice sense of space around the drum kit. So fantastic for real kits. And then on the overall drums bus, well, on the, let's say on the programmed beat, I use the 4K on pretty much all my buses for kind of overall tone shaping. And what I'm doing here is not essentially, I'm listening to the whole mix. So this might sound great in isolation. But when played with obviously everything else, you need certain things to poke out, and that's a kind of common theme with the buses. So I'll get them sounding, you know, decent by themselves, and then fit them into the track using the bus processing as best I could. So here I'm taking off pretty much all of the low end. Be here with and without that. So, which is something I felt it needed. And then on the overall drums bus, this is both these together. Got more, a little bit of push in the mids, nothing much else on there. More hi-fi for the drums, and this is doing quite a big job. And this would have been probably because I would have tried turning the overheads up and maybe trying to get some more of that kind of cymbal wash, particularly the ride here. I didn't obviously feel the ride mic was appropriate, so I'm kind of taming some of those highs and then adding in a ton of this with this plugin, which I found this kind of works best. With a bit of parallel limiter, so that's kind of adding some compression or a compressed version between 2K and 10K, 3K and 10K. And that really added this kind of brightness and sheen that I was looking for. Especially on the, obviously the cymbals and the top of the snare as well. And then on most of my buses, I tend to use the Neve virtual mix bus. And to me that just sort of adds a bit more density around the mid-range, a bit more push in the mid-range, which is nice. So I like to have that. And that's pretty much it for the drums. Moving on to the bass. Nothing on the bass bus. I did all my processing on the individual tracks, which you can see from part 1, my video there. On the guitars, I tend to, again, I've got the 4K, and this was quite a big difference. I found that without this, well, let me just bring it in and out. So that's adding more kind of sheen to the guitar parts. So I'm pushing a kind of big part of the mid-range here. And that kind of needed it, I felt, when everything else was playing. So the guitars needed to kind of poke through the mix a little more. And then hi-fi again, adding quite a bit of processed high-end. So those two in combination, just really kind of pushing the guitars out into the mix more. And then the keys. Again, some more mid-range highs, mids, high mids and low mids, and some hi-fi. Usually I have this 33609 plugin. If it's more, if there's more kind of keys, if it's kind of a synthesizers and that kind of thing, I find this helps kind of glue them together a bit more. But it was kind of, they were sort of static, airy parts with the piano that I added, so didn't need any more compression. So that's the keys. Now the keys and guitars go to the music bus, and here's a technique I like to use on the music bus where the vocals trigger the reduction in terms of frequency, and this track spacer plugin really good for kind of creating space and mainly for the vocals to poke out. So you can see what this is happening here. So the frequencies of the vocals are pushing down in the music bus to make space for the vocals to cut through. Just here without it. So when that's in, I can hear the vocals are kind of clear up front, or clearer, I should say, particularly the kind of mid-range, high mids, and the music just sort of sits back, and then when the vocals stop, the music comes back to normal in a natural way. So great plugin, really works, I feel. And then some widening. So I'll tend to use this on my music bus. That's pushing the musical elements out to the side of it, leaving the kick, snare, lead vocal, bass in the middle to kind of punch through even more. So not a huge amount of width, but you can hear the effect here. So particularly in those acoustic guitars, because they're the loudest there, they just sort of appear wider, which is nice. And then more of my Neve mid-range push there. So altogether, that's kind of all the bus processing that I did on the track, and hopefully you've enjoyed watching me walk through this. I'll put some links to if you want to hire me as your mixing engineer. I'll put some links to my website. Thank you for watching to the end, and until next time.